Job chapter 6. Now, the more we go through the book of Job, the more we can see the poetic structure of the words here, the poetic structure. This is a book of poetry. And when you first look at it, you kind of think, well, why would that be? But the poetic structure of these conversations, which we're going to become more and more acquainted with as we go on, the poetic structure of these conversations between these men demonstrate their high education. Now, higher education, especially in old times, not so much here in the United States in the modern days, but higher education in the old days was primarily restricted to those of wealth and perhaps those of royalty. If we were just common folks like you and I, back in these Old Testament times, chances are we would have a very low education. And so these men, with this poetic structure, these are learned men, in other words. The way these things roll off their tongue and the way they speak and the fluency they have in their original language, and we can truly see it here likewise in our English translation. But the way they bring ideas up and conversation, it's very fluid. It's very poetic. And again, it's very educated. And so we see, once again, that these men are of high education, indicating they were men of wealth. We've already semi-established that. Job, we saw in the first couple of chapters, was a wealthy man with a large family and so on, and property holdings and things like that. We recognize that. And the same with his miserable comforters, I should say. So Eliphaz, we saw last time speaking, and we learned about the straw man fallacy. So Eliphaz, with his own understanding, which is very limited, Eliphaz thought he had it all figured out, we remember last time. And so Eliphaz was creating this hypothetical scenario about Job, and Eliphaz was saying, oh, Job, obviously, Eliphaz is saying, obviously, Job, you have some hidden sin. And you've been a hidden sinner for years. And of course, we mentioned last time that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's not the issue. But Eliphaz is saying, well, you're not forgiven. You've been doing some things under the table, and God knew about it. You fooled us, Job, but you didn't fool God. Now God's going to have his way with you. So he built what we recognize as the straw man fallacy. He was building this situation, this hypothetical situation that did not and does not exist, because the Lord told us in the very first chapters that Job was a righteous, holy man. But yet Eliphaz jumped in and said, no, Job, you must be a sinner. And so he built this ignorance in his own mind, and then he began to tear it apart. And so Eliphaz was absolutely wrong, because we know all the insides of it. And so we've got to be careful in the volume of our words, because in the volume of our words, sin is very abundant. So we need to be very careful. So Eliphaz just kept talking and chiming in and rattling on, and he finally exhausted his position. And now Job, here in his absolute misery, we remember that Job had lost everything. Job is covered from head to toe in boils. Therefore, can you imagine? He can't stand, literally, without pain. He can't sit down without pain. He can't lay down without being in pain. And so this man is in the utmost posture of misery, and he's listening to his friend that previously was silent for the last 7 days, and that was the best thing these men could have done, was just sat with Job. But after 7 days, as we saw last time, Eliphaz had to pipe up. Now Job somehow musters a response in Job chapter 6, verse 1. Now Job answered and said, oh, that my grief were fully weighed, and my calamity laid with it on the scales. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. So once again, Job is speaking kind of in this poetic way, this eloquent way. He's saying, if my grief was weighed on a scale, it would weigh a tremendous amount, my grief. But then if my calamity, in other words, my quote-unquote sin were to be weighed, my grief would outweigh it. Because Job keeps asking and is wondering, why is this happening to me? I'm a righteous man. I'm a holy man. I'm a man that loves God. And that's what he has been maintaining this whole time. And so he continues to maintain that. And in verse 4, he continues on with his thought in his poetic fashion. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. My spirit drinks in their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Fascinating that Job is not blaming the devil. He's not blaming anything like that. He is, in a way, blaming the Lord. I'm not blaming, but he is giving credit to the Lord. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Often we give way too much credit to the devil. Matthew 10:28. Matthew 10:28 reminds us, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. In other words, Matthew is saying, fear God. Jesus is saying, fear the Father. In other words, get right with the Lord. Because if you're not right with the Lord, therein lies your real problems. It's not the world. It's not so much the flesh. Oh, sure, these are all issues. But Jesus is saying, get right with the Father. Make that a priority. And so Job is correctly saying, oh, the terrors of God are arrayed against me. Now, we understand that God has given the devil permission to create this problem in Job's life. But Job is basically got the idea here. He's understanding that God's in control. God is in control. God is allowing this. In other words, Job is recognizing and broadcasting through his conversation. Verse 5, Job continues. Does the wild donkey bray? Or in other words, does the wild donkey cry out when it has grass? Or does the ox low over its fodder? In other words, do these animals complain when they have provision? And it's a hypothetical, it's a rhetorical question. The answer is no, they don't. I mean, when I feed our dog at the house, he's not complaining. He's nose into the dish, right? No complaints coming out of that guy. So no, when the animals are taken care of, they don't complain. Job goes on, can flavorless food be eaten without salt? The answer is no. Is there any taste in the white of an egg? Again, no. My soul refuses to touch them. They are as loathsome food to me. Now, those comments are Job's poetic revelation describing his misery. Everything else is content, but I'm not. I am in major trouble at this time, is what Job is painting a picture with his words. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant me the thing that I long for, that it would please God to crush me, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. Then I would still have comfort. Though in anguish I would exult. He will not spare, for I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. I mean, Job's getting to this point now, he's saying, just let me die. Just let me die. What a tragedy. This poor man. What strength do I have that I should hope? And what is my end that I should prolong my life? Is my strength the strength of stones? Or is my flesh bronze? Is my help not within me? And is success driven from me? This poor guy is borderline hopeless. And so not only is he dealing with his mental anguish of losing his children, his family, the mental anguish of losing all of his earthly goods, and now the mental anguish of the verbiage that his comforters are beginning to pour upon him. It's starting to look pretty bleak in his mind. I don't think we can disagree too much. And so he's just rashly starting to dance with the idea, maybe it'd be better if I died. Why wouldn't the Lord just let me go? Why does the Lord keep me alive so he can toy with me? See, Job is really starting to kind of go off the deep end here. Starting to kind of lose his thought process. But he's being honest. So let me die. Borderline hopelessness. And now turning from his complaint to God, Job now turns to his friends. And he says in verse 14, to him who is afflicted, kindness should be shown by his friend, even though he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. These words, Eliphaz, that you have just dumped all over me, shouldn't they have been words of comfort and kindness? And again, he's being rhetorical. The answer is, of course they should have been. And Job is saying, what is the problem? Why is it that you think that it's necessary to pile on? The Lord has control of me. The Lord is running me through the ringer. Why do you see it necessary that you pile on, Eliphaz and his other friends that we'll see shortly? So where's the kindness to be shown to me? Verse 15, my brothers have dealt deceitfully like a brook, like the streams of the brooks that pass away, which are dark because of the ice, and into which the snow vanishes. And so Job is painting this picture of a refreshing brook, but it's frozen over underneath that thick ice. You know there's water underneath it, but you can't get to the water. Now water we need to sustain life, correct? And where Job is in the middle of the desert, and so anyone, as he's relating to his friends and relating to you and I, he's saying, hey, that water is life-giving water, but if you can't get to it, what's the point? And so this brook that has bubbling waters, but it's frozen over. It's like a frozen lake. You cannot get to that life-quenching, that thirst-quenching water of life. Then he goes on to the flip side. So he's talking about the winter. And in verse 17, now he shifts seasons, if you will. When it is warm, the brook cease to flow. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The paths of their way turn aside. They go nowhere and perish. Many times, especially as a young kid growing up in the mountains, there's a creek that goes right through the middle of the town of Idlewild. It's called Strawberry Creek. And in the early spring, as the snowpack begins to melt, the Strawberry Creek is very filled and it's flowing, and we'd go fishing in there and catch wonderful trout and things like that. But the point is that early in the spring, the creek would be flowing freely. But as the summer became hotter and hotter, and the snowpack had melted off in the high country, all of a sudden that creek started getting smaller and smaller and smaller all the way through the summer. And that's the flip side that Job is talking about. When the water is searched for in the summer, it's no longer found. And that's his conversation here is to his friends, I need help. And you're bringing me more affliction. This is not what I need. I need a drink of cool water, so to speak. But it's not to be found. Verse 19, he continues with this idea. The caravans of Tema look. The travelers of Sheba hope for them. In other words, the bubbling springs as they're traveling across the Sahara Desert. The caravans look for these bubbling brooks. They hope for them. Verse 20, they are disappointed because they were confident. They come there and are confused. In other words, when they come to that creek or that brook is dried up and they're disappointed. Job is saying, I found comfort when I saw you men coming to my side. In my mind, I thought, great, my friends are here, and you sat with me for the last 7 days. and you mourned with me. But now all of a sudden, why is it that you've changed your tune and you are now adding to my grief? I'm confused about this. I thought I was coming to a brook to get a refreshing drink, but now I find nothing but sand. For now you are nothing. You see terror and are afraid. You look at me and for some reason you're afraid. I'm your friend. We've got a history between one another, Job is saying. But you see me now and you're afraid. Why is that? Verse 22, did I ever say to you, in other words, along the line, bring something to me? Have I ever asked you for anything out of order? Or have I ever asked you to offer a bribe for me from your wealth? Have I said, let's deal deceitfully in some of our business dealings? Have I ever done that? We've got a lot of business dealings together. We've established a lot of things over the years. Have I ever suggested something crooked? And then, of course, the answer is no to these questions. Have I ever asked you to deliver me from the enemy's hands or redeem me from the hand of the oppressor? In other words, when I made a mistake and I was being corrected, I didn't ask you to pull me out of the fire. I needed to be corrected. And it was okay. So I never asked you to pull me out. I never asked you to go talk to your buddy, the judge, and get me a pass. I didn't ask for a get-out-of-jail-free card. Job is saying, show me where I've messed up in the past. Bring me that, remind me. Have I ever done anything crooked, is what Job is saying. In your presence, we've got a long history. And you know I am an upright citizen. You know that. So why is it that you're dumping on me? Teach me, in verse 24. Remind me of these things, in other words. Remind me of the iniquity that I displayed in your presence. Teach me and I will hold my tongue. I'll stand corrected. Remind me of something I have forgotten about and I'll receive it. Teach me now. Cause me to understand wherein I have erred. No problem. Correct me. How forceful are right words, but what does your arguing prove? You've built this false little man of me, and it's not true, Eliphaz. You've created something that doesn't exist, and then you've taken that non-existent scenario and you've told me how to fix it. It doesn't exist, so why are we even bothering? How is it that you've come to these conclusions? Show me in our dealings where I have erred. Verse 26, do you intend to rebuke my words and the speeches of a desperate one, which are as wind? Yes, you overwhelm the fatherless, and you undermine your friend. Now therefore, be pleased to look at me. Don't look at me in terror anymore. Begin to look at me with pity at least. Be pleased to look at me, for I would never lie to your face. And you know, Job is saying, and you know it. You know what I'm saying is true, is what Job is saying. These are close friends. Yield now, verse 29, let there be no injustice. Yes, concede, my righteousness still stands. You know I'm righteous. Admit it. Get it back in the forefront of your thinking. For some reason it's slipped away from you. But concede and recognize my righteousness still stands. Is there injustice on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern the unsavory? Do you think you're trying to tell me something here? I'm asking the Lord where it is that I've erred and I haven't heard a word from our God. And I still maintain my righteousness holds, my holiness holds. Is there not a time of hard service for man on earth? Are not his days also like the days of a hired man? Like a servant who earnestly desires the shade, and like a hired man who works, who eagerly looks for his wages? So I have been allotted months of futility and wearisome nights. have been appointed to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise and the night be ended? For I have had my fill of tossing till dawn. Once again, covered head to toe with boils. Never able to become comfortable for more than a couple of seconds in any position. So I'm tossing and turning all night, wondering when the morning will dawn. My flesh is caked with worms and dust. My skin is cracked and breaks out afresh. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. A weaver's shuttle is simply if someone was putting together a garment or a piece of material and they were weaving it, and by the time they got to the end and the loose ends on the end of their garment, they would take what is referred to as a weaver's shuttle. It would be like a pair of scissors, and they just clip off those loose ends. And it's just a quick thing with the weaver's shuttle. They would just kind of roll over. It was very sharp, like some razor blades, just kind of cutting over those loose ends. And so Job, once again, in his poetic fashion, is saying that my days are swifter than the weaver's shuttle. So that weaver's shuttle would just go back and forth, and those loose ends would just drop to the floor. And that's how long my life is going to be. I'm a walking dead man. I'm going to die any day. And so again, can you just hear the hopelessness, the cry of Job? And the cry, won't you just befriend me for my last couple of days? You have to continue to be critical. I mean, my days are spent without hope. Verse 7, oh, remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. I mean, Job is just really starting to give up. But he goes back and forth, as we'll see throughout the weeks. But he's at this point right now, my eye will never again see good. I had a wonderful life. It's all been taken away. And it'll never be restored. That's a bad place for people to be. It'll never be the way it used to be type attitude. We don't know that. But we can get so low that we start thinking that way. My eye will never again see good. Verse 8, the eye of him who sees me will see me no more. While your eyes are upon me, I shall no longer be. In other words, in your presence, guys, which will be soon, I'm just going to die. That's what Job is saying. While you guys are here, I'm going to die. As the cloud disappears and vanishes away, so he who goes down to the grave does not come up. He shall never return to his house, nor shall his place know him anymore. And of course, we remember in these Old Testament times, this is way before the revelation of Jesus Christ. The revelation of Jesus Christ and the victory over the grave. And of course, in these Old Testament times, people just thought of Jehovah God as you get this period of time, and then you go to the grave, and that's it. And that was the understanding of God at this time. And so in a way, Job was just asking for relief. Just let me die. Just let me die and rest in the grave. And that's where he's coming from. Therefore, verse 11, I will not restrain my mouth. Starting to get into some shaky area. We need to be careful when we open our mouths. But Job is having a tough time. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. We brought this up in the past, but can we recall some of those decisions that we made when we were completely emotional? We agreed that they weren't always the best choices to make important decisions while we were emotional, right? And that's what Job is here, is I'm very emotional. I'm not going to restrain my mouth. And he knows, in the back of his mind, he knows by him speaking, he's going to say something dumb. But his flesh just won't allow him to remain quiet. I will speak the anguish of my spirit, and I will complain. I will verbalize the bitterness of my soul. Now, the Lord doesn't mind when we come to him privately and say, you know what, Lord, I don't get it. Or why was this? Or Lord, I thought for sure that it seemed like you set my heart on this particular scenario. God doesn't have a problem with that. But we've got to be careful that we keep it between him and us and the Lord. or a close confidant in a counseling session or whatnot, but we've got to keep it very private. The minute we begin to start kind of spewing our emotions publicly, that's when we can get into trouble. Because we're saying things that we shouldn't be saying. An hour from then or a day, the next day, we realize, man, what did I say? Especially when we speak to a loved one, someone we care about. Again, when we speak emotionally, we can say things that are absolutely misrepresentative. And often, we regret saying those things. But yet here, Job is saying, I can't restrain myself. I've got to complain. I've got to speak the anguish of my spirit. It's just bottled up. I need to vent it out. And that's what he did. And he goes on and asks, am I a sea or a sea serpent that you, in other words God, that you, God, set a guard over me? Interesting way that Job speaks about the sea or the sea serpent. And in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 29, the writer of the Proverbs, and in Proverbs chapter 8 is wisdom speaking. And wisdom is turned into a person, if you will, a third person. And wisdom is saying, hey, I was with the Lord from the beginning. And I gave, and the Lord called upon me, and so on. And it's a very wonderful, Proverbs 8 is very wonderful. But in Proverbs 8:29, wisdom is saying, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters would not transgress his command. And so Job is saying, is recognizing the sea, and Job understood, and Job was alive way before Solomon. And so Job is looking at the sea crashing in on the beach, and then pulling back out and crashing in on the beach and pulling back out. And the Lord spoke to Job at one time in his life and said, I've drawn a line for the sea, and the sea cannot transgress my line in the sand. And so Job is saying, and giving credit to the Almighty, the Creator, the creativity that he has. And Job is saying, am I a sea? Am I the sea? Or like a sea serpent which is under your command, Lord? Job also speaks about this, and we'll see it later, but in Job chapter 38, he speaks about the sea creature, as we touched on previously, the Leviathan. And again, we'll look at these things a little more in depth as we continue through the book of Job. And so Job is asking, am I a sea or a sea serpent that you set your guard over me? When I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, but then, Lord, you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than my body. And so Job is saying, I find no comfort, whether it's day or night. When I finally do get a little bit of sleep, you come with terrifying visions. And of course, this is not of the Lord. This is of Satan. Satan's ridiculing and fighting against Job to get him to curse the Lord. I loathe my life, verse 16. I would not live forever. Let me alone, for my days are but a breath. Why are you picking on me? I mean, he's beginning to feel sorry for himself, and he doesn't understand. Why are you picking on me, Lord? And again, I don't blame Job here. I think he's handled himself very well up to this point. And throughout the book, he's handled himself well, although the Lord had to correct him in some areas. But overall, I think we'll all become Job fans before it's all over. Verse 17, what is man that you should exalt him? In other words, take recognition of him. Why do you concern yourself with man? That you should set your heart on him. So Lord, why are you watching mankind? That you should visit him every morning and test him every moment. Why is it? What makes us so special? Why me? Why do you have your thumb on me, Lord? Testing me. How long? Will you not look away from me and let me alone till I swallow my saliva? In fact, I can't even swallow. I can't hardly breathe. And again, Job is misrepresenting the Lord, but he's saying, I don't know who else Who else to ask? You've got this control over me. Why? Have I sinned? What have I done to you, O watcher of men? Why have you set me as your target so that I am a burden to myself? What have I done? I don't get it. Tell me what I've done and I will correct it. I will ask for forgiveness. I will sacrifice. I'll do whatever you want. But come on. Speak to me, Lord. Why then do you not pardon my transgression? You don't tell me what my transgression is, and therefore it's not being pardoned. And why don't you take away my iniquity? For now I will lie down in the dust, and you will seek me diligently. But even in death, Job is saying, you'll still seek me, but I will no longer be. And so poor Job, and we want to, tonight is to really kind of stir up, hopefully, a little compassion for our brother here. I mean, he is really hurting. And we're going to see that throughout the scriptures. And so if I could ask the worship team to come join me. Tonight, as we've been continuous in our study, we've seen and will continue to see that Job continues to maintain himself as holy and righteous. And that's correct, because that's exactly the stamp that God has put on this man. This man is holy and righteous. Have you considered my righteous man Job? In your coming to and fro, have you considered? And God knew that Satan had considered Job. There's no question. But the Lord is just bringing it to public knowledge. Have you considered my righteous Job? Job tonight also reminds us that life on this earth is very difficult. The only way we can combat that is to get our eyes off of this temporary life and get our eyes on Jesus, just as Stephen, as the pastor's going to teach us this coming week, as Stephen looked up into the heavenly realm and saw his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, with his arms open wide. He says, come on, Stephen, time to come on home. I pray so much that as we go through this book of tragedy and seemingly hopelessness, I pray that it lifts our eyes up to the heavenly realm. And I pray that the Lord comforts you in this book. It shows us that God does care for us. He loves us more than we've ever known. And through these scriptures and through these teachings, I pray, again, that we would allow the Lord to lift up our hands under the heavenly realm and straighten our knees, put our head up, and praise the Lord. So if I could ask you to join us by standing. Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you so much, Lord, for your comfort, for your love, for your patience with us, Lord, and really just demonstrating through our brother Job how much you believed in him from the beginning. You put him up as a trophy. You were grateful. You were proud of him. You let him be on the front line, Lord God. But you never left Job. You never forsook him. But we pray, Lord God, that we can know as we cry out to you to keep us, Lord. Oh, deliver us, Lord. Lord, this world can bring us down. But we ask you, Lord God, to be front and center of everything we do, think, and desire.